Welcome. Welcome to this dialogue that I am about to have with my colleague and friend, Yumiko, who is a clinical counselor living on Vancouver Island in Nanaimo. And we have many years of a collegial relationship. And this topic today on perimenopause and menopause is a rich dialogue that is a teaser inviting you to want to learn more about how this subject interfaces with many aspects of mental health, neurodiversity, sensory processing, and leaving you hopefully wanting more.
Kim, I am so excited to talk to you about one of the topics that I keep hearing about in this menopausal stage, which is women who are experiencing a lot of rage. And
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Whew. The topic of rage and mood in general as it relates to hormonal instability. Let's use that language. Because perimenopause isn't a thing. It's actually a tremendous amount of dramatic hormonal variability where there are many changes in different chemical aspects of our being. And this is the part that is deeply important in this overall dialogue. There are changes in the neurochemical we call serotonin. And serotonin regulation, which means the stability of this neurochemical, which is produced in the brain and in the gut and interacts with hormones, has an influence on mood stability and impulse modulation. How well I inhibit, stabilize, organize how I feel. Together with neurochemicals such as dopamine and GABA, these three are deeply affected by the hormone changes that are unstable at this time. Now, I want to talk about GABA, and I'm going to talk about GABA a lot in this whole dialogue around perimenopause because GABA is a neurotransmitter of sedation, soothing, and inhibition. And this fluctuation that we experience this during this period of time diminishes our GABA and makes it very difficult to feel safe in your own body. What do you think about that, Yumiko, so far? Even that statement.
Oh, that's incredible. This is not something, there's so much information about menopause out there, but I find that what you're talking about is being able to synthesize and make it relatable because this makes so much sense. Yeah, thank you.
So, I mean, when you think about this sort of change, it's like up and down. I often think about neurotransmitters like a DJ board, you know, when the DJ mixes all the music and slides all the different dials up and down. This is happening at rapid fluctuation during perimenopause, and it makes the brain more reactive and less capable of regulation. That term is used so frequently. And so as a result, stress tolerance is very narrow. And that's really what rage is. It's a stress threshold collapse, not a character shift. I think that's the biggest message I want to communicate is that, when a woman who's in perimenopause, you see these little hits on Instagram where a husband might said, "What happened to my wife? What happened to her personality?" And it sounds like this dramatic character shift. This is just a narrowing of the stress response where there's just so limited resource in the nervous system to manage stress in its typical way.
And so would that relate to folks like women, for example, all of a sudden struggling to like, I need to turn left at a busy intersection and it's dark, it's raining. I have to turn off the music. I have to tell everybody in the car to be quiet so that I can focus to be able to turn. Like, why is this so hard to drive? Something that you were doing for many, many years.
Well, that's not a simple, straightforward answer. But in a way to briefly respond to that, what you're talking about in that question is the fancy term we use is allostatic loads. It's like if I take my coffee cup and think about the size of my coffee cup as being capable of managing stress, that there are many different contributors to what I experience as stress. Dark, the music is on, my kid is screaming in the back seat, my teenager is screaming in the back seat. There is a guy beside me honking his horn. These would be examples of allostatic loads. And when I have lost or had fluctuations in my estrogen, my progesterone, my GABA, my serotonin, my dopamine, my cortisol, these are also stressors in my coffee cup that make my capacity, this regular size coffee cup is now a demitasse. And I can't manage all those different loads of stress in a balanced way anymore. And so it comes out in an impulsive anger, or I have to shut off the music because it's the only thing I can do in that particular example. I may not be able to control the other variables, or I turn to my kid in the back seat and I say, "Shut up!" Right? That I my normal capacity to manage those loads is now much smaller, and it will expand and collapse dependent on the hormonal state of the moment.
Okay. And so that would impact things like executive functioning. People often talk about, oh, my brain fog. I used to be able to, think on my feet, and it's like my brain is like really foggy, and I can't quite, yeah, have access to the same. Yeah.
There's another variable in here that is complex in this dialogue, and it's sleep. In that, of course, these fluctuations in hormones impact multiple parameters that influence how we sleep. Temperature being just one of those. That when estrogen and progesterone relationships change, a structure in the brain called the hypothalamus says, it's too hot, and then I'm freezing. Or the balance of regulation of all the different shifts of sleep are affected. And your sleep is another stress buffer. So if I am having less, for example, deep sleep, more interruptions in my sleep, this has a secondary impact on my executive functions, the management of my stress response. So, it's like if I took many of the listeners that are in our community have heard me talk about what we call the bicycle wheel model, spokes on the wheel, where there's a function in the middle of the bicycle wheel with many contributing spokes that affect that function. And so perimenopause, if we put that at the center of the bicycle wheel, it would affect so many different functions that have interacting relationships. So when we talk about, for example, something like executive functions, it's not just the perimenopause, but all the sideways effects of those neurotransmitter hormonal changes as it impacts my overall function in daily life, that then has a secondary impact on how I think. You can see how complicated this conversation is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I wanted to ask about, often I also hear too that women are all of a sudden are like, why am I dizzy? And it's not necessarily related to, like if I stand up too quickly. And so I'm curious about the connection between vision and vestibular.
Again, that question is way too specific. When you have changes in hormonal neurotransmitter interactions, you're going to see shifts in sensory processing, because sensory processing is an outcome of neurotransmitter hormonal interactions. So hormonal shifts can increase auditory sensitivity, light sensitivity, tactile irritation, vestibular sensitivity. And the vestibular sensitivity alone can be from fluctuations in the amount of water that you're carrying in your tissue, because inside of our vestibular system is fluid that is highly affected by these changes in hormonal balance, as an example. So, again, it's not your question leads to a rabbit hole of unpacking as to the complexity of the question why, which is important when we're looking at treatment,
Yeah.
right? Or suggestions of support. But generally, people who already have sensory processing differences are likely to experience lower thresholds, further, more vulnerability, and even micro stimuli will feel invasive, or cumulative sensory loads will build up more rapidly, and this can lead to even more allostatic loads where that coffee cup just can't handle it. So, it's not such a one straight line answer that dizziness or lack of balance is a direct outcome. It's more like the whole system is trying to manage all of the ways that these chemicals work together, and it has a downstream cascading effect on the sensory systems that may be the experience of each individual differently.
So fascinating, Kim. So fascinating.
Yumiko, thank you so much for even wanting to have this conversation and opening the doorway to a bigger picture, even to talk about the vagus nerve and menopause and regulation and like autonomic states. And this could be a huge invitation to have a deeper dialogue that I don't think is very common. The impact of trauma on the outcome of perimenopause. This further dialogue around neurodiversity and perimenopause. So this very introductory, men need to have an understanding of this information. So this little tiny invitation is stay tuned for more to come. And thank you for paving the way in this dialogue.
Thank you so much, Kim.